A resounding thud against human ribcage reverberated through the hushed assembly hall, akin to a firearm discharge. Officer Brock Holloway stood over the accused, a self-satisfied smirk etched on his features, confident he had just disciplined a vagrant wanderer who had overstepped his bounds. The individual on the ground, bound and mute, offered no cry, not even a tremor. He merely lifted his gaze, his eyes glacial, analytical, and unnervingly tranquil. Holloway perceived himself as the aggressor. However, in that fleeting instant, a palpable chill permeated the entire chamber. They hadn't apprehended a criminal, they had cornered a predator. And with the sudden jingle of a telephone, the hunt had officially concluded. The weathered sign welcoming travelers to Oak Haven, Alabama, proclaimed its legacy of Southern hospitality and robust law enforcement. Yet, for Marcus Sterling, navigating the oppressive heat of a Tuesday afternoon in his matte black Ford F-150, it felt more like an impending snare. Marcus was not seeking confrontation. In recent years, he rarely did. At 34, he possessed a quietude that only those exposed to overwhelming clamor could truly afford. His knuckles, resting gently on the steering wheel, bore scars, a chronicle of violent encounters etched in locations such as Kandahar and the Horn of Africa. He was a Master Chief Special Warfare Operator, a Navy SEAL with Tier 1 security clearance, presently on leave and journeying cross-country to visit his sister in Florida. He wore no uniform, opting for a simple, faded gray t-shirt, worn denim jeans, and a baseball cap pulled low. To the casual observer, he appeared as a drifter. To a judgmental one, a potential victim. A flash of blue and red lights materialized in his rearview mirror. Marcus exhaled, the sound barely discernible above the air conditioning's hum. He glanced at his speedometer. He was traveling at 45 miles per hour in a 50-mile-per-hour zone. His vehicle registration was current, and his license plates were in order. He guided his truck onto the gravel shoulder, the loose stones crunching loudly beneath his substantial tires, and silenced the engine. He lowered the window, placing both hands atop the steering wheel, fingers spread, an unthreatening, by-the-book posture. In the side mirror, he observed the approaching officer. The man was burly, with a thick neck and a buzz cut that aspired to a military aesthetic but lacked its discipline. His uniform was snug across his midsection, and his name tag read Holloway. His hand instinctively rested on the grip of his service weapon. "License and registration," Holloway barked, not bothering to reach the window. He maintained a tactical, though imperfect distance of 3 feet behind the B-pillar. "Good afternoon, officer," Marcus responded, his voice a deep, steady baritone. "It's in the glove compartment. I'm going to retrieve it now." "I didn't ask for a play-by-play, kid. I want the damn ID." Marcus paused. The condescension was sharp, practiced. He slowly reached over, opened the glove compartment, and retrieved the leather wallet. He presented his driver's license, a standard Florida civilian permit, keeping his military identification concealed. He preferred not to leverage his rank unless absolutely necessary. His sole desire was to pass through Oak Haven without incident. Holloway snatched the plastic card, squinting at it under the glaring sun. Underscore, underscore, quote, underscore 5, underscore, 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 quote, underscore 6, underscore, 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 quote, underscore 7, underscore, underscore, Holloway mimicked, leaning down until his face was mere inches from Marcus's. The aroma of stale coffee and chewing tobacco wafted into the cabin. "You know why I pulled you over? I was doing 45, officer. You swerved, crossed the center line. I suspect you're under the influence." It was a fabrication, a blatant and lazy falsehood. Marcus's eyes narrowed slightly, assessing the threat. Holloway was clearly seeking a confrontation, driven by boredom, anger, or sheer malice, with Marcus serving as the convenient target. Underscore, underscore, quote, underscore 11, underscore, underscore, Holloway emitted a rough, unpleasant chuckle. Underscore, underscore, quote, underscore 12, underscore, 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 quote, underscore 13, underscore, underscore, Holloway bellowed, his hand snapping the retention strap on his holster. Marcus quickly calculated the odds. He could disarm Holloway in under 2 seconds, break the man's wrist, crush his windpipe, and be back on the road before the dispatch radio even crackled. But that belonged to a past life, to the theater of war. Here, on American soil, the rules of engagement were decidedly different. Here, he had to concede to ultimately prevail. Slowly, deliberately, Marcus unbuckled his seatbelt and opened the door. He stepped out, his height exceeding the officer's by 2 inches. The officer blinked, surprised by Marcus's imposing stature. The drifter was built like a fortress, solid muscle coiled beneath the gray cotton fabric. "Turn around, hands on the hood," Holloway commanded, roughly shoving Marcus's shoulder. Marcus did not falter, absorbing the force with the resilience of a stone wall deflecting a pebble. He placed his hands on the hot metal of the hood, spreading them apart. Holloway kicked Marcus's ankles apart with more force than was warranted. He conducted a perfunctory pat-down, his touch rough and intrusive. He found nothing but a wallet and a folded piece of paper in Marcus's back pocket. __15__ Holloway demanded, snatching the paper. __16_ Marcus stated. It was a letter from the Department of the Navy, specifically from Admiral Creighton, pertaining to his impending Medal of Honor ceremony. Holloway, however, did not open it. He simply crumpled it and stuffed it into his own pocket. __17. Holloway smirked. __18. __19. Marcus stated calmly. __20. Holloway seized Marcus's wrist, twisting it behind his back and snapping the handcuffs on with agonizing tightness. "Welcome to Oak Haven. We don't appreciate your kind causing trouble here." As Marcus was pushed into the confines of the cramped patrol car, he caught a glimpse of Holloway's face in the rearview mirror. The officer was on his phone, a grin plastered across his face. __22. Marcus leaned his head back against the partition. He closed his eyes and began the breathing exercises he had mastered during Bud's training. Inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4. Holloway remained blissfully ignorant. He had just placed handcuffs on a phantom. The holding cell at the Oak Haven County Courthouse reeked of bleach and despair. Marcus sat on the metal bench, his posture impeccably upright. He had undergone processing, fingerprinting, and had been relieved of his belt and shoelaces. His truck had been towed to the impound lot, his phone confiscated. He had requested his single phone call 3 times. Each time, the booking sergeant, a man named Miller who bore a striking resemblance to Holloway, had scoffed and replied, __23. Marcus understood the tactic. Isolate the target, break their spirit, compel them to plead guilty simply to make the ordeal cease. It was Wednesday morning when they finally dragged him out. He hadn't slept, yet it was imperceptible. His eyes were clear, his face freshly shaven. He had utilized the cold water from the cell sink, and his demeanor remained unshakably composed. This unnerved the deputies. Prisoners typically wept, pleaded, or screamed. Marcus simply observed them. "Court is in session, Sterling," Holloway sneered, appearing at the cell door. He looked refreshed, his uniform pressed, prepared to perform for the judge. "Judge Reynolds is a stickler. You'd best show some respect." "I always respect the law," Marcus said softly, "when it is upheld." Holloway's face contorted. He jabbed his baton into Marcus's ribs. "Move." The courtroom was smaller than Marcus had anticipated, featuring wood-paneled walls, a flickering fluorescent light overhead, and a gallery sparsely populated with listless locals. At the defense table sat a young woman with frizzy hair, presiding over a disorganized stack of files. Sarah Jenkins, the public defender, appeared utterly exhausted. "Mr. Sterling," she whispered as he sat down, handcuffed to the chair, "I'm Sarah. Look, I only received the file 5 minutes ago. Holloway claims you were swerving erratically, intoxicated, and that you struck him." Marcus looked at her. "I don't drink, and if I had attempted to strike him, he wouldn't be walking." Sarah paused, studying the man beside her. She had represented countless drifters, addicts, and petty offenders. She could discern a client's dishonesty. This man, however, exuded a different aura, a profound gravity. __32_, she said, straightening her papers. underscore underscore quote underscore 33 underscore 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 quote underscore 34 underscore underscore Marcus stated. Underscore underscore quote underscore 35 underscore underscore the bailiff bellowed. Judge Reynolds swept in, a man in his 60s with silver hair and a face that appeared chiseled from granite, and not in an agreeable manner. He bypassed the files, his gaze fixed on the clock. Underscore underscore quote underscore 36 underscore underscore Reynolds droned. Underscore underscore quote underscore 37 underscore 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 quote underscore 38 underscore underscore Sarah said, her voice betraying a slight tremor. Reynolds peered over his spectacles at Marcus. Underscore underscore quote underscore 39 underscore 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 quote underscore 40 underscore underscore Marcus interjected. His voice carried to the back of the room without requiring him to shout. Underscore underscore quote underscore 41 underscore underscore Reynolds slammed his gavel. Underscore underscore quote underscore 42 underscore 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 quote underscore 43 underscore underscore Marcus continued undeterred. Underscore underscore quote underscore 44 underscore underscore the courtroom fell silent. A drifter citing the Constitution. Holloway, standing near the witness stand, let out a nervous chuckle. Underscore underscore quote underscore 45 underscore 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 quote underscore 46 underscore underscore Reynolds hissed. Sarah rose, but Marcus remained seated, his eyes fixed on Holloway. The officer was smirking again, feeling secure in this domain. Underscore underscore quote underscore 47 underscore 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 quote underscore 48 underscore underscore Reynolds said, leaning forward, his voice dripping with venom. Underscore underscore quote underscore 49 underscore 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 quote underscore 50 underscore underscore Marcus stated. Underscore underscore quote underscore 51 underscore 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 quote underscore 52 underscore underscore Reynolds guffawed. Underscore underscore quote underscore 53 underscore 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 quote underscore 54 underscore underscore Marcus said. Underscore underscore quote underscore 55 underscore underscore Holloway froze. He hadn't checked behind the license. He had simply made an assumption. Reynolds turned to Holloway. Brock, check his ID. I saw his Florida license, Judge. He's lying, just trying to stall. I don't have time for this, Reynolds snapped. Bail is set at $50,000. Remand him to custody until trial. Your Honor, Sarah protested. That's excessive for a DUI. He assaulted an officer, and he's a flight risk, Reynolds roared. And if he speaks out of turn one more time, I'll hold him in contempt. Marcus glanced at the flag standing in the corner of the room. Its gold fringe caught the light. He had bled for that flag, watched friends perish for it, and now these men were using it as a shield for their corruption. The anger, cold and sharp, began to surge within his chest, but he suppressed it. He needed to be astute. Officer Holloway, Marcus said, his voice dropping an octave, you took a letter from my pocket, a letter from Admiral Creighton. Where is it? Holloway paled. He remembered the crumpled paper, having discarded it in the trash bin outside the station. I don't know what you're talking about, Holloway lied. You are under oath, Marcus stated. Shut up, Holloway shouted, stepping away from the stand and moving toward the defense table. The bailiff made no move to stop him. Reynolds remained impassive. You shut your mouth, boy, or I'll shut it for you. Holloway now loomed over Marcus, the veins in his neck bulging. Is that a threat, officer? Marcus looked up, completely unfazed. That look, that absolute absence of fear, shattered Holloway. He thrived on fear. He required it. When he didn't receive it, he panicked. Holloway drew back his leg. Underscore, underscore, quote, underscore 70, underscore, underscore, Sarah screamed. But it was too late. Holloway's heavy tactical boot slammed into Marcus's chest. The chair tipped backward. Marcus hit the floor with a hard impact. The handcuffs digging into his wrists, the wind knocked out of him. The courtroom gasped. Even the bored locals sat up. Holloway stood there panting. Realizing he had just kicked a handcuffed defendant in open court, Judge Reynolds appeared shocked, but quickly regained his composure. Quote, 71, Marcus lay on the floor, tasting blood. He could feel a bruised rib, perhaps a hairline fracture. He took a deep breath, rolled onto his side, and looked up at Holloway. He did not grimace. He smiled, a terrifying predatory smile. Quote, 72, Marcus whispered. Quote, 73, The cell door slammed shut with a finality that vibrated through the concrete floor. Marcus lay on the thin, stained mattress, his breathing shallow. The kick to his ribs hadn't broken the bone. He recognized the specific, sharp, grinding pain of a fracture, but the bruising was severe, likely affecting his intercostal muscles. Every breath was an exertion. Officer Holloway hadn't just kicked him. He had dragged him down the hallway, laughing with two other deputies, making jests about tripping and clumsy prisoners. They had stripped him of his dignity, or so they presumed. But dignity was not something individuals like Holloway could confiscate. It was an intrinsic quality. An hour passed. The sun began its descent, casting long, barred shadows across the floor. Footsteps approached, not the heavy, stomping stride of Holloway, but the rhythmic click of heels. Quote, 74, a female voice said. It was Sarah Jenkins. Quote, 75, the guard grumbled. The keys rattled, and the door swung open. Sarah stepped inside. She appeared transformed from her courtroom persona. The exhaustion had been replaced by a nervous, almost frantic energy. Her hands trembled as she clutched her briefcase. Quote, 76, she whispered, gazing at the dark bruise already forming on Marcus's jaw from his impact with the floor. Mr. Sterling, I don't know what to say. I've witnessed them be rough before, but that in front of the judge, that's what they do when they think no one is watching. Marcus rasped, sitting up slowly, wincing and placing a hand on his side. Even when everyone is watching. I'm going to file a motion, Sarah declared, though her conviction wavered. I'll report this to the state bar. I'll call the ACLU. But Reynolds, he knows everyone, the prosecutor, the mayor. It's a boys' club. Marcus, they're going to bury you. If you don't plead out, they'll keep you here for months before trial. You'll rot in this cell. Marcus looked at her, perceiving a good person ensnared in a flawed system. She was young, idealistic, and entirely out of her depth. I am not pleading, Sarah, Marcus said calmly, and I am not rotting here. How can you be so calm? She hissed, crouching down to avoid detection by the guard outside. They just assaulted you. You're facing felony charges. Sarah, Marcus said, his voice lowering to a whisper that commanded absolute attention. Do you have a phone? Sarah blinked. Yes, but I'm not allowed to let you use it. If Holloway catches me, I don't need to use it. You do. Marcus leaned forward, the pain in his ribs flaring, but his eyes blazed with an intense, cold fire. You heard me mention Admiral Creighton in court. Holloway laughed. Reynolds laughed. They think I'm a homeless veteran making up stories. Aren't you? Sarah asked gently. Marcus, it's all right if you are. PTSD is real. I can get you help. Listen to me. The authority in his voice silenced her. It was not the voice of a drifter. It was the voice of a man who had led teams through darkness and guided them back. My name is Master Chief Marcus Sterling, SEAL Team 6. I am currently on leave following a deployment in the Horn of Africa. The letter Holloway threw away was notification for the Congressional Medal of Honor ceremony in Washington, D.C. next month. Sarah stared at him, the silence in the cell deafening. She observed his hands, scarred and lethal. She noted his posture. She met the unwavering truth in his eyes. If that's true, she whispered, her face paling. If that's true, they just assaulted a highly decorated active duty service member. They did? Marcus nodded. And they are holding me without cause. They have confiscated federal correspondence. They have violated my civil rights. He recited a number from memory. A Washington, D.C. area code. Memorize this number. Sarah, do not write it down. 2025519, extension 4. Ask for General Vance. Tell him Viper has been grounded in Oak Haven. Viper? Sarah repeated, her heart pounding. Just tell him that and tell him about the kick. Sarah stood up, feeling dizzy. This was preposterous. If he was lying, she would look utterly foolish calling the Pentagon. But if he was telling the truth... "Time's up!" the guard yelled, banging his baton against the bars. Sarah looked at Marcus one last time. "I hope you're real, Marcus." "Make the call, Sarah. Burn it down." Sarah hurried out of the cell, clutching her briefcase to her chest like a shield. She bypassed the desk without stopping and ignored the deputies snickering as she passed. She walked out of the courthouse into the humid Alabama heat and entered her battered Honda Civic. She drove 3 blocks to a gas station parking lot. Her hands were trembling so violently that she dropped her phone twice. She dialed the number. Ring, ring. Pentagon switchboard, secure line. A crisp, robotic voice answered. Sarah froze. It was real. I need to speak to General Vance," she stammered. "Extension 4? Authorization code?" I don't have one, but a man named Marcus Sterling told me to call. He said Viper has been grounded." There was a pause, a silence that stretched for 5 seconds but felt like 5 years. "Hold the line, ma'am. Do not hang up. We are tracing your location for verification." Sarah's eyes widened. Tracing. Suddenly a new voice joined the line, deep, gravelly, and radiating authority. Underscore, quote, underscore, 107, underscore, 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 quote, underscore, 108, underscore, 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 quote, underscore, 109, underscore, underscore. The general's voice deepened, not with anger, but with something far more menacing. "On what charges?" "DUI, resisting arrest, assault on an officer." "But General, it's a lie. He wasn't drunk. And in court today, the arresting officer, he kicked Marcus while he was handcuffed on the floor. The judge saw it and did nothing." The silence on the other end of the line was absolute, the quietude of a predator spotting its prey. "Is he injured?" "He's bruised. He's in pain, but he's calm. Scary calm." "Yeah, he does that," Vance muttered. "Miss Jenkins, listen to me very carefully. You are safe. You have done your country a service today. Go back to your office and wait. Do not go back to the jail. Do not speak to the sheriff." What are you going to do?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. "We're coming to get him," Vance stated, "and God help anyone standing in our way." The line went dead. Sheriff Buford T. Miller was a man who relished life's simple pleasures: bourbon, college football, and reigning as the undisputed king of Oak Haven County. He sat in his office, feet propped on his desk, laughing as Holloway recounted the courtroom events. Underscore, quote, underscore 119, underscore, Miller wheezed, wiping a tear from his eye. Underscore, quote, underscore 120, underscore, quote, underscore 121, underscore, Holloway grinned, popping a peanut into his mouth. Underscore, quote, underscore 122, underscore. It shattered like a biscuit. Reynolds covered for me, claiming the individual lunged. We apprehended him. "Boss, we're going to proceed with charges of assault. Keep him confined for 6 months. Perhaps assign him to labor detail. Impart some decency." "Excellent work, Brock," Miller acknowledged with a nod. "Outsiders must grasp our position. This is our domain." The wall clock swept past 4 in the afternoon. Outside, the firmament began to blush with shades of violet and ochre. It had been a tranquil evening until the telephone on the sheriff's desk chimed. Not the general line, but the private extension, the one exclusively accessible to the mayor and the governor. Miller's brow furrowed as he lowered his feet. "Yes, Sheriff Miller, Sheriff," a voice, choked with panic, spoke. It was the air traffic controller from the modest county airfield, located 5 miles from town. "Sheriff, something significant is transpiring here today." "What? No. Why?" "Because I've just received a priority override directive from the Federal Aviation Administration. They have just established a flight path for heavy transport, military designations. 3 Black Hawk helicopters and a C-130 Hercules are entering our airspace. They are not responding to my radio calls. They have just broadcasted a Priority 1 code." A cold sensation prickled the back of Miller's neck. "Military? Likely just a training exercise, a flyover. Sheriff, they are not flying over." The controller's voice rose in volume. "They are descending. They are landing on the highway. Route 9. What? Miller stood abruptly. That's 2 miles from the station. Before he could fully comprehend the situation, the station door burst inward. Deputy Cletus, a young man who typically managed the front desk, rushed in, his complexion ashen. "Sheriff, you must look outside. You have to see what's happening." Miller and Holloway moved towards the window. Oak Haven was a placid community. The most significant disturbances were typically the backfire of a large truck. But now, a low, resonant vibration was subtly shaking the glass of the sheriff's office window. It intensified. A steady, percussive beat, thump, 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 that caused the coffee mugs on the desk to rattle precariously. "Is that?" Holloway squinted. 3 dark silhouettes roared overhead, clearing the rooftops of Main Street. They were exceptionally low, alarmingly so. The powerful downdraft whipped up debris and refuse from the gutters. The noise was overwhelming, a palpable force that battered against the structure. Black Hawk helicopters, devoid of any insignia, save for faint gray numerical markings on their tails. They hovered above the courthouse plaza, their rotors slicing the air with ferocious precision. "What on earth is transpiring?" Holloway shouted above the din. Suddenly the telephone on the desk rang again. Then the dispatch radio crackled to life. Then the fax machine began to whir. "Sheriff!" the dispatcher screamed from the adjacent room. "State troopers are making contact. They report the highway is secured. A convoy is en route. They claim federal jurisdiction." Miller snatched his hat. "Everyone out front, immediately. Bring the shotguns." "Sheriff, perhaps we ought not," Cletus stammered. "I gave an order. Move." Miller, Holloway, and 4 other deputies surged out onto the front steps of the sheriff's station. They raised their shotguns and service pistols, uncertain of their target, but prepared to safeguard their territory. The helicopters had repositioned, circling like predatory birds. But as a convoy approached down Main Street, it presented a sight that sent a chill of pure terror through Miller. It was a convoy, but not just any convoy. Leading the procession were 4 black SUVs bearing government plates, their grills aglow with flashing red and blue emergency lights. Following them was a formidable armored personnel carrier, and flanking them were 2 military Humvees, their gunners positioned in the turrets. Although the weapons were directed downwards, the implicit threat was undeniable. The convoy screeched to an abrupt halt directly in front of the station. The door of the lead SUV swung open even before the vehicle had fully stopped. A man emerged. He was attired in a navy blue dress uniform, impeccably tailored and sharp. The gold stripes adorning his sleeves extended all the way up. An admiral. He was immediately followed by 6 individuals clad in full tactical gear, helmets, body armor, automatic rifles held in a low, ready position. They bore no police insignia. Instead, they displayed trident, seals. Holloway's shotgun trembled in his grasp. "Sheriff, who are they?" "Lower your weapons," Miller whispered, his voice strained. "Lower them now." The admiral strode up the steps, disregarding the weapons pointed in his general direction. He halted 3 feet from Miller. He was an elderly man, his hair silver, his countenance resembling granite chiseled with resentment. "I am Admiral Creighton," he barked. "Who is the commanding officer of this facility?" I am," Miller stammered, holstering his weapon. "Sheriff Buford Miller. Now listen here. You cannot simply land helicopters in my town and remain silent," Creighton commanded. It was not a shout, but an order. "You are currently detaining a Tier 1 asset of the United States government. Master Chief Marcus Sterling, you have 10 seconds to produce him, or I will authorize these men to dismantle this building brick by brick to locate him." Holloway stepped forward, attempting to project an air of authority. "Now, hold on a moment. That individual is a criminal. He assaulted an officer. He is being held." For Creighton's gaze shifted to Holloway. He observed the name tag. He noted the ill-fitting uniform. He perceived the apprehension concealed beneath the bravado. "Officer Holloway, I presume?" Creighton inquired softly. "Yes, that's me." "The one who kicks handcuffed individuals?" Holloway froze. How do you—" "We are aware of everything," Creighton stated. He turned to the tactical team leader positioned behind him. "Lieutenant, secure the perimeter. No one is to depart. I require federal warrants to be served on every computer and filing cabinet within this building. Should anyone resist, neutralize them." "Aye, sir," the lieutenant responded. The team moved with alarming swiftness, bypassing the bewildered deputies and entering the station. "Where is he?" Creighton demanded, invading Miller's personal space. Cell. Cell 4, Miller squeaked. Rear hallway, lead the way, Creighton ordered, and pray he is unharmed, because if he bears so much as a scratch that was not present upon his arrival in this county, your freedom will cease to exist. They proceeded through the station. The local deputies were pressed against the walls, disarmed, and secured with zip ties by the SEAL team, their movements efficient and silent. The power dynamic had shifted so dramatically that Miller felt as though he were in a dream. They reached cell 4. Marcus was standing by the bars, leaning casually. He appeared weary, and his jaw was swollen, but he was standing upright. Upon seeing the Admiral, he straightened his posture, snapping to attention, despite the discomfort in his ribs. Master Chief, Creighton acknowledged, his eyes scanning Marcus for any injuries. He noted the contusion, his jaw tightening. Admiral, Marcus replied, my apologies for interrupting your week, sir. You did not interrupt it, son. You have made it more interesting. Creighton turned to the deputy holding the keys, a trembling young man named Cletus. Open it. Cletus fumbled with the keys, dropping them twice before finally unlocking the door. Marcus stepped out. He did not look at the sheriff. He walked directly towards Holloway, who was being restrained by 2 SEAL operatives. Holloway now appeared diminished. The bully had vanished, replaced by a terrified child, comprehending the repercussions of his actions. Officer Holloway, Marcus stated quietly. I did not know, Holloway whispered. I did not know who you were. It should not have mattered, Marcus replied. It should not matter who I am. You took an oath. You have dishonored it. Marcus turned to Creighton. Sir, I request permission to retrieve my personal effects, specifically a letter pertaining to the ceremony. The letter you discarded? Creighton inquired, glaring at Holloway. Precisely. Dismantle the entire premises, Creighton commanded his men. Locate it. As the station transformed into a whirlwind of federal activity, the front doors opened once more. A man in a sharp black suit entered, carrying a briefcase. He possessed the predatory aura of a shark in human form. Admiral, the man in the suit stated, I am with the JAG Corps. We have just served the electronic warrant on the dashcam footage from Holloway's cruiser. It appears the system error they claimed erased the footage was easily circumvented by our technical team. Miller gasped. We erased that. Not effectively enough. The lawyer offered a thin smile. We possess the audio. We have the video of the stop. No erratic driving, no resistance. Merely Officer Holloway escalating a situation and fabricating an arrest. He turned to Miller and Holloway. Gentlemen, you are under arrest for deprivation of rights under color of law, kidnapping, assault on a federal officer, and conspiracy. And as this involves a military asset, you will be processed in federal court, not your cozy county setup. Holloway's knees buckled. He slumped against the wall. Marcus observed them. He felt the ache in his ribs, but the pain seemed distant now. He looked at the Admiral. Sir, there is one further matter, Marcus stated. The judge. Creighton smiled, a cold, hard expression. Do not be concerned, Master Chief. We have reserved the most significant element for last. Enter the SUV. We are proceeding to the courthouse. Judge Reynolds occupied his elevated seat upon the mahogany bench, experiencing a profound sense of satisfaction. The air conditioning in the courtroom hummed, straining against the oppressive Alabama humidity. But Reynolds felt a sense of cool detachment. He had just imposed a sentence of 90 days upon a local mechanic for outstanding parking citations, a penalty that would conveniently compel the mechanic to relinquish his business to Reynolds' silent business associate for a pittance. This was the modus operandi of Oak Haven. It was a finely tuned engine of suffering and financial gain, with Reynolds as its conductor. He glanced down at the court calendar. Next case, he grunted. Sarah Jenkins sat at the defense table, her hands clasped tightly. She had returned to the courtroom as directed, but she was utterly alone. She had received no communication from the general since their call. Had they abandoned her? Had Holloway discovered something? Every time the bailiff glanced her way, she flinched. State versus Timothy Ruggles, the bailiff announced. Wait, Reynolds interrupted, peering over his spectacles. Where is Officer Holloway? He is the witnessing officer for this proceeding. The bailiff consulted his radio. Dispatch is unresponsive, Your Honor, likely engaged with another call. Perhaps the sterling individual has caused further disruption. Reynolds chuckled, a dry, rasping sound. He probably tripped down the stairs on his way for transport. a regrettable situation. Very well, we shall proceed without him. Boom! The double doors at the rear of the courtroom did not merely open. They were flung wide with such force that one of them struck the plaster wall with a resounding crack. Every head in the gallery turned. Judge Reynolds rose, his face contorting with indignation. Order. Order in this court. Who dares? His voice faltered and died in his throat. Advancing down the central aisle was not an attorney nor a local deputy. It was a phalanx of 6 Navy SEALs in full tactical gear. Rifles slung, helmets in place, their faces obscured by ballistic eyewear. They moved with a fluid, terrifying synchronicity, clearing the aisle like a plow cutting through snow. At the heart of the formation walked Admiral Creighton, his dress blues a stark contrast against the tactical equipment of his men. And beside him, walking freely, was Marcus Sterling. Marcus had cleaned himself up. He had washed the blood from his face in the station's restroom. He held his head high, his gaze locking instantly with Reynolds. "What is the meaning of this?" Reynolds shrieked, striking his gavel. "Bailiff, apprehend these individuals. This is a court of law." The bailiff, a corpulent man named Carl, eyed the SEALs. He observed their automatic rifles. He considered his own holstered taser. He slowly raised his hands and stepped away from the bench. "I'm not doing that, Judge." Admiral Creighton paused at the bar, the wooden railing separating the gallery from the legal proceedings. "Judge Jeremiah Reynolds," Creighton's voice boomed, filling the chamber without the aid of amplification. "I am Admiral Thomas Creighton, United States Navy. You are currently presiding over a criminal enterprise masquerading as a court of justice. You possess no jurisdiction here." Reynolds spat, though his hands trembled. "This is Oak Haven County. Depart before I hold you in contempt." "I don't believe you comprehend the chain of command, Jeremiah," a smooth voice interjected. From behind the SEALs, the JAG lawyer, Commander Vance, no relation to the general, but equally astute, stepped forward. He placed a heavy black Pelican case on the defense table, next to a stunned Sarah Jenkins. "We are invoking the Patriot Act and the Uniform Code of Military Justice," Vance stated calmly, opening the case to reveal a high-tech projector and communication unit. "We have declared this courthouse a crime scene under federal jurisdiction due to the kidnapping and torture of a Tier 1 military asset." "Kidnapping?" Reynolds guffawed nervously. "Mr. Sterling was arrested for driving under the influence." "Was he?" Vance pressed a button. A large projection screen, hastily erected by 2 of the SEALs in mere seconds, flickered to life. The video was crystal clear. High-definition dashcam footage. The courtroom watched in silence as the screen displayed Marcus's truck driving perfectly within its lane markings. They observed Holloway pulling him over. They heard the dialogue. No slurring, no stumbling. They witnessed the escalation. They saw the letter being pilfered. Then Vance clicked to a new file. "And this," Vance declared, his voice hardening, "is the security footage from within this very courtroom 3 hours ago. The footage you ordered deleted, Your Honor." The screen changed. It depicted the earlier hearing. It showed Marcus in handcuffs. It showed Holloway's boot connecting with Marcus's ribs. And then it revealed the most damning detail of all. It showed Judge Reynolds witnessing the event unfold. It showed him flinching, then settling back into his chair. It showed him stating, "The officer was protecting the court." The silence in the room was absolute. The local residents in the gallery, individuals who had endured Reynolds' oppressive rule for decades, began to murmur. Then the murmurs escalated into angry whispers. "You lied," Sarah Jenkins declared, standing up. Her voice now carried strength. "You witnessed him kick a handcuffed man, and you officially recorded it as self-defense." Reynolds slumped into his chair. He appeared diminished. His granite facade had crumbled into dust. I have connections in the Senate," Reynolds whispered weakly. "You cannot touch me." Marcus stepped forward. He walked through the gate, past Sarah, and stood directly beneath the bench. He looked up at the man who had attempted to ruin his life for sport. "Your friends are not present," Marcus stated softly. "But mine are." Admiral Creighton nodded to the team leader. "Lieutenant, secure the package." 2 SEALs ascended the steps to the bench. Reynolds scrambled backward, tripping over his robe and sending his gavel clattering to the floor. "Get your hands off me! I am a judge!" he screamed as they secured his hands behind his back with zip ties. "Not anymore," the lieutenant replied. As they escorted Reynolds from the courtroom, past the astonished onlookers, Marcus turned to the gallery. He saw fear in their eyes, fear of authority, fear of power. "It is over," Marcus informed them. "The sheriff is in custody, Holloway is in custody, the judge is gone." He turned to Sarah Jenkins. She was weeping, tears of relief streaming down her face. "You made the call," Marcus stated, extending his hand. "You saved me." Sarah took his hand. It felt warm and calloused. "I believe you saved us, Marcus. This entire town, we've been drowning." "Not anymore," Marcus echoed. But as the adrenaline subsided, a nagging suspicion surfaced within Marcus. He looked at the files Vance was packing away. He observed the terrified expression of the bailiff. "Admiral," Marcus said, turning to Creighton. "Why? Why? Why did they do it? Holloway was a bully, undoubtedly. But Reynolds, he jeopardized everything to expedite my conviction. He was eager to see me imprisoned immediately." "Why the haste?" Creighton frowned. "We assumed it was merely prejudice and a power trip." "No," Marcus shook his head. "Holloway said something during our encounter on the road. He remarked, 'It appears he might have cash.' And in the cell, the guard mentioned their need to meet quotas for the contract." Marcus looked at the JAG lawyer who managed the prison facility. Vance checked his tablet. "It's a county jail. But wait, it's operated by a private contractor, a company named Sentinel Corrections and Logistics." Marcus's eyes narrowed. "Sentinel. I am familiar with them. They operate in conflict zones. Mercenaries masquerading as security personnel. Investigate the ownership," Marcus ordered. Vance tapped furiously, his eyes widening. "Sentinel Corrections is a subsidiary of a holding company, Reynolds Land Trust." The courtroom fell utterly silent once more. "The judge owns the prison company," Sarah gasped. "He arrests individuals." Marcus realized the pieces were falling into place, much like the bolt of a rifle. He convicts them in his own court. He sentences them to his own prison. And then he charges the state for their housing, Vance concluded, and he utilizes asset forfeiture laws to seize their vehicles, their cash, their residences to cover legal expenses. "It's not a justice system," Marcus growled. "It's a human trafficking operation." Admiral Creighton's face flushed a deep shade of purple. They intended to profit from the sale of a Navy SEAL. "They intended to try," Marcus stated. He glanced toward the doorway through which Reynolds had been removed. "Admiral, our work is not yet complete. We have apprehended the ringleader, but we must eradicate the entire operation." The sun had set over Oak Haven, yet the town seemed brighter than it had in years. Floodlights from military generators illuminated the town square. The locals, typically confined to their homes after dark, were now out on the streets, observing federal agents dismantle the corruption that had oppressed them for a decade. But Marcus was not in the square. He was in the rear of a black SUV, speeding down a dirt road 5 miles north of town, escorted by the SEAL convoy. "The target is a warehouse complex on the outskirts of the county," Vance explained, indicating a map on a tablet. According to Reynolds' seized laptop, this serves as the headquarters for Sentinel Corrections. "It's where they process high-value assets confiscated from prisoners. My truck," Marcus stated, "and likely millions in stolen property," Vance added. "But Marcus, you are injured. You should be in the medevac." "My ribs are bruised, Commander." "My hands are functioning perfectly," Marcus replied, checking the chamber of the Sig Sauer P-286 the Admiral had returned to him. It was his personal sidearm, recovered from the sheriff's safe. "I am seeing this through to the end." The convoy extinguished its lights as they approached the compound. It was encircled by a tall chain-link fence topped with razor wire. Security cameras were ubiquitous. Thermal imaging reveals 12 heat signatures inside. The team leader, a placid giant named Dutch, reported over the comms. "Armed civilians are present. It appears they are utilizing prisoners as labor." "Slave labor?" Marcus muttered. "In America, rules of engagement?" Dutch inquired of the Admiral. "Hostile," Creighton responded. "They are armed combatants involved in a federal kidnapping conspiracy. Engage them." The lead SUV smashed through the gate. Crash. The metal groaned and snapped. The convoy surged into the yard. "Federal agents down. Get down." Gunfire erupted immediately. The Sentinel guards, private mercenaries paid to protect the judge's illicit gains, did not surrender. They opened fire with automatic weapons from the loading dock. Marcus was out of the vehicle before it came to a complete stop. He moved instinctively, the pain in his side forgotten, replaced by the flow state of combat. He rolled behind a stack of crates, delivering 2 precise shots into the shoulder of a mercenary on the catwalk. The man screamed and dropped his rifle. "Move up! Flank left!" Dutch shouted. The SEALs advanced like liquid, efficient and lethal. The mercenaries were accustomed to bullying prisoners and intimidating locals. They were unprepared for Tier 1 operators. Marcus moved towards the main office door. A guard emerged, raising a shotgun. Marcus did not hesitate. He sidestepped, grabbed the barrel, wrenched it downward, and delivered a palm strike to the man's chin. The guard collapsed instantly. Marcus kicked the door open. Inside, the warehouse resembled a department store. Rows of luxury vehicles, motorcycles, stacks of electronics, jewelry, and safes. It was the plunder from 1,000 illegal arrests. In the heart of the chamber, a man was furiously destroying papers. He was immaculate, clad in a suit that cost more than Marcus's entire yearly income. "Hold still," Marcus commanded, aiming his firearm. The man became rigid. He glanced at Marcus, then at the device meant for destruction. "You cannot enter this area. This is private premises. Sentinel Corrections has an agreement with the state." "Agreements are void," Marcus stated. He approached and disconnected the machine. He examined the partially obliterated document in the man's grasp. It was a financial record. Marcus retrieved it. He perused the initial entry. Designation, Marcus Sterling. Estimated worth of assets, $40,000. Automobile, $50,000. Cash and securities. Method of disposition, indefinite confinement. Justification, significant threat. No immediate family. Quote, 127, Marcus read aloud. He turned to the individual. Quote, 128, quote, 129, The man stammered, perspiration beading on his forehead. Quote, 130, quote, 131, Marcus remarked. Dutch and the remainder of the contingent secured the locale. Admiral Creighton entered, surveying the vast quantities of illicitly acquired possessions, valued in the millions. Quote, 132, Creighton murmured. Quote, 133, quote, 134, quote, 135, Sarah Jenkins interjected. She had insisted on accompanying them. Wearing a ballistic vest over her professional attire, she approached a filing cabinet and withdrew a drawer. Quote, 136, she collapsed to her knees, weeping. The crushing burden of her complicity, the dawning realization that she had been an unwitting pawn in this elaborate scheme, overwhelmed her. Marcus returned his weapon to its holster. He moved towards Sarah and knelt beside her, disregarding the sharp ache in his ribs. He placed a hand on her shoulder. Quote, 137, She looked up, her eyes crimson. Quote, 138, Marcus affirmed resolutely. Quote, 139, Sarah wiped her eyes. She gazed at the files. Quote, 140. She whispered. Quote, 141, quote, 142, Admiral Creighton pledged. Quote, 143, Marcus rose and proceeded to the rear of the storage facility. There, concealed beneath a covering, was his Ford F-150 pickup. It bore scratches. The interior had been rifled through, but it remained. He opened the door. The missive from the Admiral was absent, yet something else was still beneath the seat, concealed within a compartment the operatives had overlooked. He withdrew a small, velvet case. He opened it. Within lay the Purple Heart he had earned in Afghanistan. He clutched it tightly. They had not managed to seize everything. Quote, underscore 144 underscore Dutch called out. Underscore quote underscore 145 underscore quote underscore 146 underscore Marcus responded. Underscore quote underscore 147 underscore. He exited the warehouse and stepped into the nocturnal atmosphere. The flashing lights of the convoy were now augmented by those of news vehicles. The story had become public. The entire world was observing Oak Haven. Marcus leaned against his vehicle. He was utterly depleted. His body ached, but the air felt purer than it had in days. Admiral Creighton joined him. Underscore quote underscore 148 underscore quote underscore 149 underscore quote underscore 150 underscore. Marcus looked at his bruised knuckles. Underscore quote underscore 151 underscore quote underscore 152 underscore Creighton inquired. Underscore quote underscore 153 underscore Marcus observed Sarah Jenkins, who was already engaged in a telephone conversation with the media, coordinating the release of those wrongfully incarcerated. Underscore quote underscore 154 underscore Marcus stated. Underscore quote underscore 155 underscore Creighton smiled. Underscore quote underscore 156 underscore. The extensive rehabilitation of Oak Haven spanned several months, but its repercussions were immediate. The video depicting Holloway assaulting Marcus went viral across the globe within hours, amassing millions of views and igniting a nationwide uproar. The Department of Justice did not merely investigate. They enacted a sweeping purge. Sheriff Miller, Officer Holloway, and Judge Reynolds faced legal proceedings 6 months later. This time, the courtroom presented a markedly different tableau. There were no friendly faces in the spectator section, only stern federal prosecutors and the relatives of their victims. Holloway wept openly as he was sentenced to 20 years in federal custody. Reynolds, divested of his judicial robes, his assets, and his dignity, received a life sentence without parole for orchestrating a criminal enterprise under the guise of legal authority. The irony was not lost on anyone when they were transported to a federal penitentiary, one that held no contractual arrangements whatsoever with the Reynolds Land Trust. Sarah Jenkins emerged as the district attorney in a decisive special election. Her inaugural action was to nullify over 500 wrongful convictions that had been systematically arranged by the Reynolds administration. She had discovered her voice, and she was no longer speaking in hushed tones. She transformed the corrupt judicial edifice into a beacon of genuine justice. As for Master Chief Marcus Sterling, he stood tall in the East Room of the White House 3 weeks later. The president bestowed the Medal of Honor upon him, acknowledging his valor abroad. However, for the inhabitants of Oak Haven watching on television, his most significant confrontation had transpired on their very soil. He did not, however, linger in the public eye. True to his nature, he packed his vehicle, extended a final handshake to Sarah, and departed into the twilight. He was a discreet warrior, a sentinel who appeared when needed and vanished once his task was accomplished. Yet, Oak Haven would forever remember that Tuesday afternoon when they attempted to breach a seal, only to discover that they themselves were the fragile ones. What an extraordinary journey through the corridors of justice. It is profoundly disquieting to contemplate how readily authority can be abused when unscrupulous officials believe they are unobserved. Nevertheless, it is infinitely gratifying to witness the outcome when the virtuous ultimately retaliate. Marcus Sterling demonstrated that genuine fortitude is not derived from being the most vociferous individual present. It resides in knowing precisely when to make the appropriate decision. He not only rescued himself, he preserved an entire community. What course of action would you have taken if you had been in Sarah's predicament? Would you have jeopardized your career and personal safety to place that call to the Pentagon, or would you have prioritized your own security? Share your perspectives in the comments section below. If this account of swift retribution and ultimate justice resonated with you, please bestow a like upon it. It significantly contributes to the channel's expansion. Do not forget to share this video with an acquaintance who appreciates a tale of well-deserved comeuppance, and subscribe with notifications activated to ensure you never miss our subsequent dramatic presentation. Thank you for viewing.